Hi everyone, good Monday evening to you. Hope you had a good weekend. It is Weather for Weather Geeks time. We're about 9 days away from Christmas, and we got lots of weather happenings to talk about over the next several days with a big warm-up, it looks like, coming for the very end of the year. We're going to talk about the longer range in this video, in addition to what we can expect over the next several days. We did 51 at the airport today. Now, for the month, about halfway through December, we're running 2.8 degrees below the average, factoring in both highs and lows. But I'll tell you, I'm still not convinced at all that this is the way the month is going to finish as far as the numbers, because look at today's 8 to 14 day temperature outlook from the Climate Prediction Center. This is basically from Christmas Eve through New Year's Eve, and boy, warmth favored from coast to coast, including around here. Now, it's the end of December, so it's of course not going to be 75 or 80 degrees, but I think we've got a lot of highs in the 40s and perhaps even 50s in our future between Christmas and New Year's. And so, every month in 2024 has been warmer than the average. Can we do a clean sweep and go 12 for 12? I think that's a possibility, despite being almost 3 degrees below average halfway through the month. Now, today was a good news, bad news scenario. The good news is it was mild. The bad news is we had rain for a lot of the afternoon. 24-hour rainfall totals, highest kind of right in the middle of our viewing area, from about Hanoverton, Alliance, heading up towards Columbiana, New Middletown, New Wilmington, and over towards Grove City, Mercer, Slippery Rock, Jackson Center, places like that. That's generally where the highest rainfall totals have been over the last 24 hours. A little less to the south, a little less to the north. But hey, we didn't have to shovel any of this, and I certainly am thankful. Scattered showers will be with us, it looks like, for the next handful of hours this evening. But I'll tell you, we're going to shake the raindrops by midnight or so at the latest. As you head out the door tomorrow morning, we should be in pretty good shape. So this will be the best day of the week overall. It won't be quite as warm as today, but it'll be sunnier in the afternoon than it was today. No wet weather concerns for our Tuesday. Take advantage of this day if you can. The rest of the week, not as nice. The first weather maker is a cold front. It heads our way Wednesday, and I think by lunchtime it's going to be raining. And while this probably is not quite as much of a slam dunk as far as any freezing rain concerns Wednesday as we had Sunday morning, got a little slick in some spots Sunday morning, certainly. I could see where for an hour or two it's right at 32, something like that, as this rain pushes in midday Wednesday. I'm not real concerned about some sort of big impacts from any icing. It's just going to be chilly raindrops for much of the midday and afternoon, maybe a few snowflakes in the mix. And then we're kind of in between systems once again on Thursday. It's kind of a on-off pattern, it looks like, this week until things turn a little more consistently cold at the end of the week. The next weather maker is this guy right out here on the edge of the screen. It's going to track towards the lower Great Lakes Thursday night into Friday, and snow showers, pretty good bet around here. And also a pretty good bet it's going to turn pretty darn cold. These are the daybreak wind chills through the end of the upcoming weekend. Temperatures will be mostly in the 20s for daytime highs by the weekend. Wind chills in the morning hours, teens Saturdays, single digits on Sunday. And, I do think there's going to be some modest snow accumulations out of flurries and snow showers. We're not looking for a lot out of this, but this is important when we start our discussion about the white Christmas chances, because while I don't think it's going to snow from Sunday through Christmas Eve, there could still be snow on the ground, because say you get an inch or two of snow out of this scattered snow shower regime Thursday night, Friday night into at least the first half of the day Saturday. It's not going to melt a whole lot for the rest of the weekend into early next week, with temperatures staying well below freezing, it looks like, through at least Monday night, and perhaps even a good chunk of Christmas Eve as well. So white Christmas odds, our update on this 9 days out, historically speaking. And again, we get our official observations at the Youngstown Warren Airport. Historically speaking, 45% chance of an inch or more of snow on the ground at the airport Christmas morning. We're going to put the odds this year at 25%. Now, they would be lower if it were not for the snow shower activity we're expecting at the end of this week into the first half of the weekend. Because again, I don't think it's going to snow Sunday, Monday, or on Christmas Eve. But I could see where some places might still technically have at least an inch worth of snow still on the ground by Christmas morning. Then the warm-up commences by Christmas Day, and that'll take us through the end of the year. So these snowflakes this weekend, Friday, Saturday, maybe early Saturday night, these are probably the last snowflakes of 2024, because we're heading into a milder pattern starting Christmas Day and taking us through, it looks like, at least New Year's Day and probably the first few days of the new year. And I wanted to go into a little bit of kind of geeky meteorology on this video this evening, because one of the things we look at really carefully when we are looking at medium range forecasting, especially in the winter season, is something called the Madden-Julian Oscillation, or MJO for short. And basically the MJO is a cluster of convection or thunderstorms that circles the equator. And, this is a year-round phenomena, but it can especially impact weather patterns downstream in the northern hemisphere winter, because this convection, or these clusters of thunderstorms, can make the jet stream do things over the Pacific, and therefore the jet stream does certain things over North America. The numbers you see on this graphic are what we call the phases of the Madden-Julian oscillation. So phase 1, phase 2, etc., 1 through 8, and once it passes phase 8 and goes back to phase 1, the whole process kind of repeats. And in a La Nina, which is what we're heading into, and by some definitions we're already in, La Ninas tend to favor the convection staying kind of right in through here, as opposed to getting out into these regions and back into the Indian Ocean. And the reason for that, in a La Nina, you typically have stronger trade winds blowing like this from east to west, and then sometimes you have stronger westerly wind bursts coming from the western part of the Indian Ocean, and where those jets or those air masses collide, you get upward motion, you get thunderstorm complexes kind of right over this area more often than not. And we've seen a lot of that so far this winter season. Well, there's some evidence in the modeling that as we get into early January, the MJO is finally going to break out of those phases a little bit and meander over towards phase 7 and perhaps even phase 8. So what? What does that mean? Well, phase 7 of the MJO is different in a La Nina, especially into January, than these phases over here. This is a diagram showing the different phases of the MJO, 1, 2, 3, and it goes around like this over to 8. And then here's a look at what we're looking at here is what we call the CFS, Climate Forecast System model depiction of the CFS, basically the history of its movement and also what it projects forward. So this starts back in early December, or early November, I should say, and then rolls all the way through November into December, and then it finishes up here on January the 14th. And so you can see the CFS is taking the MJO into this phase, into phase 7, in early January. And I'm just showing you one model here, but there's decent agreement that we're going to try to do this. We're going to try to get the MJO into a colder phase, and we say it's a colder phase because this is basically a map of the northern hemisphere. Here's North America and the United States right here. This is a map showing the overall weather pattern in phase 7 of the MJO in January in a La Nina year. And while it's no guarantee that this is the exact pattern that transpires, it's a good starting point when you're trying to project what January might be like across our part of the country. And basically what we're looking at here is a big ridge just off the west coast and a big deep trough moving through the middle of the country, and then it turns into a ridge again up towards Greenland. This is a very cold and stormy signal for the eastern U.S. So what I want you to take away from this, why am I going through all this? Well, I wanted to kind of talk about what our expectations for January might be. We're going to talk more about January in subsequent videos, but I kind of suspect January is going to turn pretty cold and perhaps stormy for at least a couple of weeks, maybe starting towards the end of the first week of January and taking us out through at least mid-month. I think that's going to be winter going pretty hard for a couple of weeks. Now, I still think the end of January, and especially into February, we can get back to a milder pattern. As is often the case in a La Nina situation, February ends up being pretty mild, and I do think there's a pretty good chance of that happening again this year. But I think we've got a pretty rockin' January ahead of us. Now, I'm more confident in the temperatures than I am the snow department. We could have a cold pattern that isn't that snowy. If the cold just overwhelms the pattern, there's not much moisture for snow in those kinds of patterns sometimes, and maybe that'll be the case this time around. But my early thoughts on January is I think we're going to have a pretty cold one this year, and then I do think we can turn the corner and end winter on a milder note in February. Stay tuned for more longer range thoughts here on Weather for Weather Geeks. Thanks for watching on this Monday evening. Have a great rest of your night. I will see you back here on Tuesday.